Item 1, apologies for absence. I've not received any. I don't think you have you? Can I? No. Okay, so we'll move on to item 2, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anyone have any comments, issues with the minutes? No. Anyone on Teams? No. Okay, so we will move on to the next item, which is items of urgent business. I've not received any. So we can, again, swiftly move on to any declarations of interest. Yeah, Linda? No one from Teams, it doesn't look like. So we will move on to item 5, which is the Youth Cabinet verbal update. So take it away.
Hi, I am the Vice Chair. Chair is currently running late. I feel like someone knows. I can't quite remember if something was worked out. Either way, I'll make my updates, and then Alicia will make her update. Hopefully the chair gets here in time. So, which is 12 months ago. Since the previous meeting, we've been working on... Oh, am I quiet? Am I too quiet? I can turn it up. Hold on. My apologies. Ah.
Do you want me to say my bit while you have tech issues? Yep, okay. Hello, it's Alicia here, not Lucia. I'm more talking from the side of the Youth Parliament side and kind of the more national scale kind of stuff that we do. We usually this time of year are running around chasing schools for Make Your Mark, which is the youth consultation that is nationally run by the British Youth Council, Youth Parliament and the DCMS. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we can't be running around chasing schools for it. So it's being done online and it's also been delayed by 2 months. So kind of my sort of focus is for the next couple of weeks, months, we're going to be kind of harassing people on email within schools and trying to get as many young people in Thurrock to kind of fill out the online survey to try and see what their point of view was come out of lockdown of issues that matter to them. A quick thing for Make Your Mark, for those who might not have heard it, it's a kind of a youth ballot, so it's something that young people can vote on, only young people. Sorry for all of you old people here. I can see a few faces, but anyway. So it's 10 issues that were kind of debated by us NYPs. So instead of getting to go to a university in the summer, we had to spend 14 hours on Zoom, and we went through 41 motions, debated every single one, and decided to prioritise which ones were priorities kind of more. That ballot then comes out the 1st of November, and I think we've got 8 weeks or something like that to get as many young people up and down the country as possible to fill out the little survey. And then at some point, hopefully, I'll get the chance to go into the House of Commons and debate the top 2 issues. But that's about the update from me. Adam, have you solved your tech issues?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Microsoft Teams was upping and downing my volume. Very annoying. Sorry, where have we been? So recently we've been putting together, or at least planning, to tackle Curriculum for Life, and we're reviving a dev project called Modular Learning Program /MLP, which is a set of small modules, generally an hour to 2 hours long, which can then be split up further into sets of 5 minutes, and each 5 minute will cover a small topic under each umbrella. So we can then give these to schools and they'll match any lesson length. And if a school doesn't want to teach a certain type of material, then they can just cut it out and teach what they want to teach. It's all made by young people for young people.
I think that's us. I think that is. Yeah.
Kind of late.
Thank you for that update. Are there any comments, questions from anyone in the chamber? Michelle?
That's better. You might be able to hear me now. Thank you for that. I'm just wondering, when you talked about the Youth Parliament and the things that were debated at Youth Parliament, I think it'd be useful to see what sorts of things were debated. And I'm really interested in whether there was any sort of discussion around COVID and the pandemic and the impact on young people.
Yeah, there was, I think, 3 top motions that were supported by, I think, up to 9 NYPs. They were the top 3 kind of things that were put forward originally before the debate started. That was firstly about having young people part of the COVID-19 recovery plan, one then being about COVID-19 and education, and then the other one being about job security for young people. But most of the motions that were put forward were around a topic that had come out of COVID or because of COVID or were based on COVID. So yeah, that kind of answers your question, Michelle.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Do you have any comments, questions from members on Teams? Okay, well, thank you for that update. As usual with this committee, please feel free to stay. Equally, if you'd like to jump out, then please do. And with that, we'll move on to item 6, which is an update from the portfolio holder for Children's Services and Social Care.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As always, I'm grateful for the opportunity to update the committee for in regards to what we're doing in social care to try and promote the service and protect the vulnerable, certainly as we go into a pretty vicious COVID recession. And certainly as the portfolio holder, I think it's quite important I do make myself available to Scrutiny Committee. As you can imagine, officers and members are working extremely hard looking at the service in regards to the financial backdrop. You know, nationally, ending up about 2 trillion in debt. Locally, we have tens of millions of pounds worth of pressures. So clearly, we're going to have extremely difficult days ahead in terms of balancing the budget. And I have to say, in all candour, that recessions result in economic breakdown, housing breakdown, and usually family breakdown. Therefore, the amount of people we expect to be accessing services or potentially entering care, we are anticipating going up. Not only does that drive our overheads up, but it causes disruption for families. So we're certainly not at the bottom of this hole. I very much hope that all members are going to work with us and in what I'm hoping is going to be a non-cynical manner as we attempt to balance the next budget. We need to accept collectively that our spending power has been hit in a very, very unprecedented way. And you know, we need to reflect on the debate that I'm starting to see brew about bin collections. You know, political grandstanding and hunting for headlines is not going to do anybody any favours. And I don't want to get into a situation where we see, as I've seen some commentary from opposition members, a debate simply geared around political expediency, drowning out the conversations we need to have in social care. I want to defend social services and promote the service to the very best of our ability, and that means we all need to muck in and accept the fact that we've got some tough challenges we need to face together. Having said all that, Chair, there is some good news that's coming out of groups like the Economic Vulnerability Task Force that I chair. We're doing everything we can to protect the front line for the vulnerable. So we are supporting our careers service Inspire, our early offer of help through our children's centres, and our youth offending service that's fighting back against gang crime. We've just appointed our new gang lead for the youth offending service. So these are the frontline services that we're trying to maintain to the very best of our ability. We're giving historic support to our foster carers. You know, on top of the £350,000 that we increased their total pay by in July of this year. You'll see a paper tonight regarding taking Thurrock-based council foster carers out of council tax. For a Band D property, that's a tax cut of about £1,600 £100, which I think shows the commitment we have as an authority to the people who care for some of our most special children. And that will help us reduce our reliance on external agency workers. It's good for the budget, and most importantly, it's very, very good for these children. We're supporting people who perhaps aren't formally in care. We're making sure that we keep going with Head Start housing to put a roof above the head of our care leavers wherever possible. We've restored the World of Work funding for the learning disabled, and we're making sure, as members would have seen, we're going out for consultation on the economic recovery strategy, and you'll see multiple references in there to care leavers and the learning disabled, making sure that those groups that this committee is so concerned about really is at the heart of that strategy, and it's not just a generic employment strategy. And the same care goes on the adult side as well. £1 million that we pay to care providers in resilience payments, putting private testing in place for our care homes, increasing domiciliary care pay above inflation, and the extra care beds that we've put in place to deal with the winter. So I hope this helps to illustrate that if we make the hard decisions and have those honest conversations, we can free up financial firepower to direct to the front line and direct for our most vulnerable. It's inescapable that we are going to have difficult conversations going forward, but I hope that some of the things that we're doing, some of the things that you're going to hear about tonight from officers, I think shows that we've got the will and the wherewithal to make sure that the focus on children is actually intensified in this period and not decreased, and not just lost in a financial conversation. So obviously I appreciate the committee's time, and if any members, councillors or lay members have got questions, I endeavour to answer them.
Thank you, Councillor Haldon, for making yourself available. And it was particularly good for me to hear you reiterate our commitment to tackling gang violence. Are there any questions, comments from anyone in the chamber? No. Anyone from Teams? Councillor Maldoni?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Howden, for your report. Obviously, you talked about the Economic Vulnerability Task Force and something about the economic situation that we may be facing. We've seen from government figures at the beginning of September 2020 that young people are more likely to have been furloughed and more likely to have been working in sectors disproportionately hit by the virus. Well, now we know that for example, a record number of 538,000 under 25s claimed universal credit during lockdown, and the number of young unemployed is likely to rise to over 1.2 million by Christmas. So I think, we need to look at this situation. We're anticipating youth unemployment rates set to hit 27% by the end of the year. If we look at Thurrock, where our youth unemployment rates are around 12%, there's just been a report by the Social Market Foundation, which is a non-partisan think tank, Britain's leading cross-party think tank, which actually highlights the vulnerable position of Thurrock in particular, and how it might recover from the coronavirus. 74% of our jobs are in sectors that are likely to be moderately to severely hit. And we know within that, young people are likely to be disproportionately affected. So my question for you is, I heard some of the things that the Economic Vulnerability Task Force is doing, but it doesn't sound like enough given the context of the situation that young people in this area are going to be finding themselves in. This is sort of looking at the midterm effects, that's 2020 to 2023. The impact for Thurrock is the fourth highest impact in the UK. And we were highlighted as one of those areas that didn't cover as rapidly from the financial crash, which is over 10 years ago now. Which highlights us as probably not having the resilience of a lot of other areas that may have had a quicker recovery from that. So we're coming from a higher unemployment level overall. We've got a situation where we've had a crisis that's disproportionately affected young people and is likely to continue doing so. And with the end of furlough in sight and the replacement programme less than adequate, what steps are you going to take to tackle youth unemployment in Thurrock? Thank you.
Councillor Horden.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Muldowney, for your comments. Also, I'm sorry to hear that you think the Economic Vulnerability Task Force isn't doing enough. I have extended a invite to a representative of the Labour Group if you'd like to encourage them to attend. I'm sure I could brief them a little bit more. I'm confused about a couple of the figures. Our unemployment rate is most certainly not going into this 12%. That's a figure I've not heard before.
Youth
and I can say,
unemployment.
and going into this, our NEET rate amongst young people was hovering somewhere about 1.5%, which is better than the national average. So I will say, in terms of our schools, our sixth forms, and our officers within our career service, we have always punched well above our weight, and it is really a testament to the things that our sixth forms and Inspire Our Career Service do together, because they really have done a terrific job at keeping our NEET figure below the national average. In terms of what we're doing, we have met with the Department for Work and Pensions, and meetings continue. As I say, as we go through the budgetary process, we are doing an awful lot to support Inspire Our Career Service. Many councils across the nation have scaled back on careers advice. That's not something we've done. In fact, we've doubled down and invested in it in recent years. So we go into this situation where a lot of councils are trying to suddenly create provision to support their young people. We go into this crisis with a battle-fit service that really is terrific. I don't think you've visited Inspire before, but I do suggest you take a look at what officers are doing down there, because it is fantastic, and I know we're doing a huge amount of outreach work. And on top of that, it's not just about skills and careers. We are making sure that young people are getting housing advice, getting mental health advice. The schools' mental wellbeing teams that we put in place about 18 months ago have been working all the way through the crisis. So for young people who are experiencing anxiety as a result of the economic downturn, we have the services in place to support them in a pastoral manner. So I would say a huge amount is being done, a huge amount is going to be done, but fortunately we do approach this crisis from a position of tremendous strength. And finally, in terms of creating new jobs, creating new opportunities, as you would have heard us announce at the last Cabinet, we put £1 million into bringing the local plan forward. The local plan will help us deliver jobs because it will help us deliver brand new homes. So I very much hope that you and many other members will be voting for the local plan when we bring it to the Chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Horden. Councillor Muldowney, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Holden, for your reply. And there are obviously areas of activity that are going on, and that's great. Yes, you're right. 16 to 17-year-olds who are not in employment, education or training levels are low. But however, those claiming benefits is 12%. That's from the government's own figures. There's a link to it on the council website if people want to go and check for themselves. And the forecasts are forecasting 27% sort of nationally. Youth unemployment by Christmas. So, I mean, I just want to give context really to the economic period that we're heading into. And I found it a bit strange that we started talking about bin collections out of nowhere, cause as this being Child Services Committee, our overall unemployment rate is 4.5%, which is above national average. And we haven't recovered fully from the last financial crash, which shows that there's a lack of resilience within our sectors. We've got 74% of our jobs at risk. because they're in moderate to severely hit sectors. And as we know, young people will be disproportionately affected by those. So just to clarify some of those figures for you. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Councillor. I'm not saying that we are not going to have serious problems with youth employment going to Christmas and beyond. As I've said, the amount of people accessing care, the amount of people who will probably enter care is going to go up. And the reason I referenced issues like bin collections is because it's very, very easy for members to get a few headlines and, dare I say it, some electioneering pledges out of such issues. I'm simply trying to reinforce the fact that if we want to protect our careers service, which has done a brilliant job over recent years, these things don't just happen. We need to make sure that we are having difficult conversations as members to direct that financial firepower to the services that are required. And I would urge you to respond to the consultation on the economic development strategy, because it clearly has several planks. It's not just about creating new jobs and opportunities, for example, bringing the local plan forward. It is also about making sure that we look after those young people who are immediately leaving sixth form or further education, and also supporting the young adults who might need to retrain. We can't forget about our young adults in this, and that's why I referenced the World of Work funding, which is doing terrific work helping the learning disabled. So there are lots of groups that are going to face lots of difficult circumstances, which is also why I referenced the mental health service, because it's vital that we help promote that pastoral role as well as the economic one.
Okay, I'm going to move on now. Thank you, Councillor Horden, for coming and making yourself available for that. The next item 7, items raised by Thurrock Local Safeguarding Children's Partnership, serious case reviews.
Sorry, Chair, I had my hand raised. You probably didn't see that. Yes?
Councillor Okanade.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Horden, thank you for your attendance. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned about the exemption council tax exemption scheme for foster care, and I'm sure you would have done your cost and benefit analysis of that. And I'm not going to make comment as such as to what you want this committee to do, because you're asking us to recommend it. But I believe that you've already proposed it and you've agreed it somehow, because it's out there in the press. But I want to ask you if you could tell us how you intend to measure the effectiveness of the scheme. And if this is going to be a permanent scheme for foster care, and how would you measure the effectiveness? You've mentioned already that there's going to be difficult days ahead anyway, and we're going to have, we're potentially maybe having more demand for services. And in saying that, there is going to be more pressure. So if you could let me know how you intend to measure the effectiveness of this scheme. Thank you.
Councillor Horden.
That's not me making whale noises. Can you hear me, Councillor Canardi? Yeah, thanks for your question.
Yes, I can hear you.
First of all, the scheme isn't already agreed. It won't be agreed until it goes to Cabinet next week. The reason it's already in the press is because I've already announced clearly, as the portfolio holder, I want a massive tax exemption for foster carers, something very few boroughs in the country do. But the reason it's referred to over in Scrutiny is because there may be comments, questions, queries, concerns that you can raise that would help refine the scheme. So I'm not really looking at you to say yay or nay to it. I'm pretty confident most of you are going to say yay. But if you do have comments, it may help refine the scheme or bring a couple of issues to the fore we've not really considered. In terms of how we're going to measure its effectiveness, we'll get on to more detail when officers present the report later tonight. But clearly, what I want to see is more Thurrock people fostering for Thurrock children. That's good for the budget because it means we don't have extremely expensive agency fees. And it's good for those children if we can help keep them in their communities. And you'll see a range of issues that we've built into the policy in terms of the eligibility. For example, the stay and put policy. We want foster carers on board with the concept that their young people should stay with them up to the age of 21. So these are important issues. That's what I want to see. I want to see more people fostering for Thurrock, living in Thurrock, and being a great part of our network. And I say that I've spoken to many foster carers about this. We've got some amazing people who foster for us, and they really give our young people a leg up in life to some young people who have not had a brilliant start in life. And if we can incentivise more of those people to come forward, make life a little bit easier for them. I met one foster carer last week here in Grays who wanted to speak to me, and he was telling me how the young man who's been with him for about 6 years really is quite musical, and as a household they've always found a way to pay for music tuition. Well, a tax exemption that's for him in a Band C property worth about £1,200, that really makes a contribution. So that's what I want to see, Councillor, and I look forward to any further commentary you've got on that proposal later this evening.
Do we have any more hands up on Teams? Okay, so I will now move on to item 7. Items raised by Thurrock Local Safeguarding Children's Partnership, serious case reviews. We were going to have a colleague from the partnership in to present this report this evening, Jane Foster-Taylor. Unfortunately, Jane is unwell, so get well soon, Jane. But now Sheila will present for us.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, I'm standing in for Jane Foster-Taylor, who was going to present this to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. You have a report in your papers, and I will just go through the overview report and then stop and we can take any questions. So this report is to inform members about the outcome of a serious case review which was published by the Safeguarding Children's Partnership on the 30th of July 2020. The children that the review is about, their names have been anonymised. So their names are in the report as Sam and Kyle, and that's to offer protection for them in terms of being identified. The report is about Sam and Kyle. Sam was born in January 2016 and very sadly died in January 2018 at home. Her sibling Kyle was born in October 2012. The coroner's outcome was that there was no presumption of non-accidental injuries or harm, and Essex Police took no further action in relation to Sam's death. So it's a very tragic death, but did not result in anyone being prosecuted or held to account for her death. It was seen as an accidental death, if you like. So the serious case review then was agreed by the local Safeguarding Children's Partnership, and the remit covered the period of time from when Kyle was born, which was 2012, through to Sam's death, which was 2018, so covering a 6-year period. Just a little bit of background about serious case reviews. Serious case reviews were established under the Children Act 2004, and the purpose of a serious case review is to establish learning for agencies and professionals to improve the way that agencies work together to safeguard children. So the report's very much about a partnership approach to how agencies and services have worked with the family, and with a real focus on, is there any learning? And most cases that you look at, you will find some learning. So it's very much about learning and what action can be taken to improve practice. So that's the main focus of doing serious case reviews. The local Safeguarding Children Board, and the partnership as it is now, can commission a serious case review for any case where it suspects there may be multi-agency learning outcomes which will improve local practice. So the serious case review report on Sam and Kyle has been provided to members of this committee and is attached in the papers. I'm not going to go through that whole report because I will assume that you've had a chance to read it. The serious case review report provides an analysis of the key lines of inquiry within the review, and the learning points are identified with 5 key recommendations. So as a result of the review, there was 5 recommendations to the partnership. You'll see at Appendix 2, the local safeguarding partnership has developed an action plan in response to the recommendations made as the outcome of the serious case review. I think another point I'll pick up on is that the serious case review is entirely independent even of the local safeguarding partnership. The report was written by an independent author, and the review itself was chaired by an independent chair. So on page 19 of your pack is listed the 5 recommendations for the Children's Partnership. And I won't read all of those because you can look at them all. And as I've already said to you, an action plan against those 5 recommendations is held at Appendix 2. So I think I'll stop there and take any questions that there might be.
Thank you for the report, Sheila. I do have a couple of questions on this. I'm pleased to, when I'm listening to you there, hear the emphasis on learning. I think that's certainly one of the most important things that has to come out of this. And on that, one of the themes of the report that I saw when reading was lack of multi-agency information sharing and communication. Now, in the action plan, that there is a section on this, and there are a couple of points that say, for example, inter-agency reflective practice sessions 3 times a year. Another point says create and implement models of multi-agency group supervision. We have these actions, they're meetings for agencies to share information, to communicate. Is there a sort of review process in place to ensure that these actions are productive, these meetings for sharing information is productive? Because we've identified the problem, we've got a couple of actions. How do we make sure that these actions are productive in the end?
Yes, thank you for that question. If you look at Appendix 2, it will say who is leading on each of those 5 actions. And certainly for the ones that are more practice orientated, the lead for those is the subgroup of the local Safeguarding Children's Partnership, and that's the Learning and Practice Review Group, who meet regularly. It's got all agencies in there, and they will go through each time they meet these actions to make sure they've been carried through. That group then reports to the Management Executive Board of the local Safeguarding Children's Partnership, again has more senior agency representation there, and we would be looking at that to say, has that delivered, how has that delivered, and can we evidence the delivery against the action plan? There's also a strategic group of the Safeguarding Partnership, and if we felt at all that there were some gaps or that this wasn't being delivered in the way that we want it to be delivered, we'd be picking it up in the more strategic group as well. So there's a number of layers where we would be looking at, are these actions being delivered? Are they having the impact we want them to have? And if there's a problem with that, how do we resolve that?
Thank you for that, Sheila. The second question that I had was regarding our listening to the voices of children in our service. On page 50, paragraph 118, it actually mentions that Mother has commented in reviewing the final report that there needs to be greater advocacy for children to ensure that their voice is heard. And I agree with that intensely. So I was wondering if you could comment more broadly on what we're doing from here on out to ensure that that voice is heard within our service.
Yes, thank you for that question. We listen to children's voices on a number of levels. So individually through their social workers who speak with children all the time and hear their views and feed them up. For children who are known to the service, we have what are called independent reviewing officers and child protection reviewing officers who are independent from the social workers, who also meet with the children and talk to the children and hear their views. Separate to that, we have a number of services that are all about engagement and participation of children, and we have a particularly good team who are very active in listening to children's voices, hearing what they have to say and feeding that back into the service so that we then take action upon what children are telling us working well, what's not working so well for children. So we have quite a sophisticated system that's built around listening to children and hearing the children's voice. When we had Ofsted come and do an inspection on us last year, you know, they commented that the service very strongly and palpably listened to the voice of children and took action around what children were telling us and young people.
Thank you. That's positive to hear. Are there any comments, questions from members in the chamber? No. I'll go to teams. Councillor Okanade.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Can everybody hear me? Thank you. Yeah. My question to Sheila is that was there any issue to be addressed as to the adequacy of Thurrock's threshold of intervention? And firstly, I would like to say that it's always very sad to hear of any unfortunate death of a child. I've read through the review, and then, I mean, obviously 2 children are involved, but unfortunately the younger one passed away. So that's why I'm asking, if you understand what I'm trying to ask is, you know, we have normal threshold of intervention when we should intervene, and I realize that there is situation where London authority was meant to be involved here and there, and I just want to ask you, is there anything to address in that area, whether you need to review your threshold of intervention or relax it in some areas? Thank you.
Sheila.
Yeah. So, Councillor Akinade, I take it that the question's about thresholds and our interventions at different thresholds. Have I got that right?
Sorry, yes, I have to be switching this on and off. Yes. Mute again.
Sorry. In terms of if you read the report and and it goes back over quite a lot of historical practice, so it's going back over 6 years, and this family are a family that moved between being involved with us from a statutory level when Kyle was born and care proceedings were taken, and he was subject to interim care orders, which is one of the highest levels of interventions in our thresholds, down to then the family moving through being subject to child protection, children in need, and then early help offer. Over that period of time, it's not unusual for families to move through the thresholds. And sometimes they may be children in need, sometimes they might be child protection. And with families where they can make improvements but sometimes can't sustain those improvements, or something happens in that family network, not necessarily just this family but any family, where there are issues for the parents in terms of parenting. So it's not unusual for children to move through different thresholds. In terms of this family, all the agencies at different times felt that things were improving for the family. And you will read in the report that there were child in need meetings where it was agreed that the family would be stepped down to early help, and or that the family would be stepped up at different times to different threshold levels. So So I think in terms of the family, and most families that we work with, we give opportunity and put lots of support into families so that they can look after their children safely themselves without the ongoing support. And before the sad death of Sam, the case had been referred once again back into the more statutory intervention of children's social care, and children's social care had begun to do an assessment at the point that Sam had quite tragically died. So I think it's, with hindsight, everybody can look back and go, well, was that at the right threshold? I think it is fair to say that in social work, families can move through thresholds, can move up and down within them, and it's a question of at what point is it not good enough, where we have to take more serious action, which involves removing children from their families.
Councillor Okanade, would you like to respond?
Oh, thank you very much, Sheila, for explaining that bit further. And it's quite understandable that, you know, this family, you know, moved through, you know, different times, the different thresholds. But I have another question, and that is to do with the GP surgery. In terms of the social care, how much can you influence the agency to take, you know, in terms of information that you share with agents such as general, you know, GP surgery? Because at some point, you know, it is said that the GP they do not have some, they're not aware of some things. So how much do you have ability to influence, to work with agencies such as the general practitioner surgeries? Thank you.
Sheila?
We work really well in Thurrock with our partner agencies on lots of levels. So at the, what I might call the front line, so schools, health visitors, social workers, youth workers, you know, work really well with children and families. And what we wrap around that is care plans usually. So we do a plan that we say this is how all the various agencies will work with those children and that family. We also have a process of reviewing that. So where I said to you before, we had independent reviewing officers and independent child protection officers who will look at that plan with all the agencies. So it's not just the council, it's the police, it's health agencies, it's schools, you know, it's youth officers, it's anybody that's actually working or involved with that family and that network. So we do a lot of work pulling agencies together, constantly reviewing and talking about, and that's with individual children and families. On a bigger level, through the Safeguarding Partnership and through Brighter Futures Partnership, which is not just about safeguarding, is about also other services that we've got across the whole of the partnership. We meet again very regularly to go through what services have we got, how do we work together, how are we joined up, how do we commission services across the whole spectrum of agencies, so not just the council but all agencies. So I do feel that we have got robust ways of meeting with all our agencies, being clear. We've got procedures, we've got policies about how we should be working together, and those can be reviewed and picked up to actually say, have we done what we said we would deliver and how we're going to deliver? So there is a strong partnership working within Thurrock. I mean, I think your question was how can we sort of ensure or make sure that people follow through what they're supposed to be doing? And the way we do that is by measuring and looking as a partnership at what we deliver and getting feedback. So getting feedback from children and young people about the services we provide. You know, are they delivering for the children and young people and their families the sorts of services they would like to see delivered?
Thank you.
Councillor Okanade, do you have any further questions?
No, thank you.
Councillor Muldowney.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. It's a shame that this report couldn't be presented by the original presenter. However, obviously this is a really tragic case. Having read the report, it very well paints a picture of two very vulnerable parents who came from troubled backgrounds, who were clearly struggling in areas of their life, and a troubled elder child who is clearly struggling. True, there were lots of different agencies that were involved, and obviously we're taking the learnings from the way that those agencies work together, and I'm glad to see the action plan is picking up some of those. I will just say as a comment on that I would certainly like to see the action plan and any updates on that come back to this committee, and that we keep a close eye on actions that we're taking to make changes. I think for me the key paragraph that just illustrated the sadness of this situation, and overall what the issues were, is 117 on page 49, which says there were several critical points at which different decisions could have been made about how to manage this case and to establish a better understanding between professionals and with parents, and to explore wider networks of support. In May 2015, the decision to end the Section 17 child in need involvement of children's social care was based on the absence of current child protection concerns, but the issues of parenting and neglect were still not resolved. In February 2016, the step down from early offer of help was due to the declining engagement from parents, as the team manager was clear that the early offer could only continue with parental consent. But there were not significant changes in the circumstances for Kyle, and Sam was a newly arrived baby. Paternal grandmother had suggested that the case be kept open from December to await Sam's birth, which was a sensible and practical move. Although she was seen as a positive support for the children, there was little exploration of whether any other networks of family or friends could be part of a safety plan. The signs of safety approach now adopted in Thurrock, which I welcome, would expect these possibilities to be actively explored. There is a contrast in the record of the team around the child discussions between generalised feedback that was positive but still specific examples of concerns. I believe that there was an understandable desire from all to hope that things would get better, despite the fact that the same concerns continued to be raised and that parents struggled to be consistent. So my question is, for me, that's the key paragraph in the report, which sums up, quite a very detailed report that spans 8 years. My question is, what specifically are we going to do to make sure that situation doesn't happen again? Where we had those 3 critical points to intervene and to get the provision right, and that didn't occur for those different reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Muldowney. Sheila?
Thank you. I think what that paragraph highlights is the reason why you have a serious case review, because it's actually the learning and sort of setting out what we need to do to take on the learning. The practice referred to in here goes back to 2015 and 2016. And I think the serious case review report, I haven't got the paragraph number in front of me, but talks about all the improvements that have been made in the service since 2015 and 2016, and has actually improved the issues that were raised in terms of the learning here. So there is the introduction of signs of safety as a practice model across the whole service, which is about strengths-based approach, and we are, as a partnership, doing the training across the whole partnership. We've also put the graded care profile, which is about families where neglect is a prevalent issue and where it is an ongoing concern. So that's also a tool that we've put in place across the whole partnership. So that's for all services, whichever service you work in. Also for our prevention and support service, we've completely remodelled it since 2016, and we've made sure that we have more social work qualified managers in the service, so that we can be looking at thresholds and making sure that where families need to be stepped up into statutory care, that's what happens. And the remodelling of the PASS service, again, was picked up by Ofsted as being very positive, and there's a quote in here as well about the PASS service from Ofsted. So I suppose what I would say is, we absolutely cannot be complacent, and we never are in terms of our services. So we're always looking for learning. We're always looking for how can we do things and improve things. And having had an independent regulator come and look at the services in 2019, could see evidence of those improvements that we put in place, including additional resources that we had into the service between 2017 and 2019.
Councillor Muldowney, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. The other point that I just wanted to pick up on is that the review has recommended that the Thurrock Safeguarding Children Partnership should consider auditing the operation of the Prevention and Support Service programme to establish the extent to which the 2019 Ofsted report has been sustained and strengthened. Can you talk a little bit about that recommendation, please?
Joe?
If I can just add a little bit to that, because to answer the question regarding the practice, what we've done is we've actually improved the quality assurance in there, and the part of the local Safeguarding Children's Partnership, they're doing, the audit group is doing independent audits regarding the practice, and then alongside that we're also doing quality assurance of dip sampling on a regular basis to test the practice, and obviously the feedback from those audits and dip sample has been very positive, showing that there's a consistency within the practice, but obviously we're not being complacent, we're continuing to do that, and there's a clear auditing programme of our prevention and support service in place.
Councillor Muldowney, do you have any further questions or comments?
Yes, can I just get a response from you, Chair, about bringing this report back to committee at a later date?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to bring this back to review the actions. That's not a problem with me. Are there any further questions from anyone? It doesn't look like it. So we'll move on to the one recommendation on page 18. I think we've accepted the recommendations, and we can agree that. Is everyone agreed? Yeah, I can see nods on that. Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to the next item then, item 8. I believe, Lee, you're presenting this.
Thank you, Chair. This report is our annual Children's Social Care Complaints Report for the period 2019-20. The real detail within the report is contained within the appendix on page 61, so I'll provide a high-level summary of that appendix. Page 61 captures the activity levels compared to the previous year. The positive message there is that there has been a drop in complaints from 39 down to 17. On page 62, that reflects and shows that 50% of complaints were upheld based on 14 complaints that were closed within the reporting period. And it's also key there that there were no complaint escalations onto stage 2, so that shows there's a level of robustness in our stage 1 response, which is positive. On pages 63 and 64, this captures some high-level learning. Don't forget, this is only based on 6 actual complaints that were upheld. So that shows some analysis of some learning for the service on those pages. And on pages 66 and 67, that indicates those areas where those complaints were upheld. And on page 68, we have a high-level summary of local government ombudsman complaints that came in for the reporting period. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Lee. I did have a question on timeliness. So I don't know if I've missed any further figures, but the only timeliness figure I can see is on page 62, and there's a drop of 40 percentage points between 1819 and 1920. Could you just provide some clarity around that?
Yeah, there has been a reduction in performance, but it's based on a lower pool. So 7 of 15 complaints were responded to within the time frame, which equates to the 47%. So I think that will be the only area where we could aim to improve as a service. I mean, the complaints are complex, but because it's difficult to push that figure up when there's a lower pool of complaints anyway.
Is there anything in place at the moment to try and make that improvement, or is that something you're looking at the moment?
I was always we provide regular reports to management team to try and ensure we respond to as many complaints as we can within the time frame. So that's always on our radar, and we provide reports to management to hopefully drive up that figure, not only in children's services but across the whole council.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members in the chamber?
Sorry.
No. I'll go to teams. Do we have any questions from Councillor Okanade?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this report. To be honest with you, it somehow does not have a lot of information that I would expect. Even though asking what is the actual nature of complaint, it is only explained where the ombudsman, which is only 3, is the reporting of the ombudsman, which is three cases there. But it does not really give us the substance as to the reason for the complaint. But obviously, I do need to commend the team for the compliments that you've got, even though you have like 17 complaints, and I know it's been reducing as well from last year to this year. On page 68, it is mentioned there that you make a savings of 3,600 for using ADR, which is the alternative dispute resolution on some of the cases. So I would like to ask you, how much does it cost you to use ADR on some of these cases? What is the sort of average? Because you're saying that you saved 3,600 for using them. So otherwise, how much, does complaint cost the council? I don't have that information in this report, but I would like to know that information. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of your first question around the level of detail on complaints, we can look to provide additional detail going forward. But what the report does do is highlight those complaint areas on page 65. So you can see the teams and areas those complaints came into, but we can look to provide some more detail going forward for future years. In terms of ADR, there were two cases for this reporting period that resulted in ADR, and that would simply mean so an element of mediation between the complaints team, the service area, and the complainant. And for these two cases, that probably took in a region about 1 hour, 1.5 hours for a meeting to take place to prevent that complaint being escalated. So not a massive cost.
Councillor Okanade, would you like to respond?
Yes. Thank you very much for agreeing to provide more information, because just going through statistics does not really give me that sort of level of information I want. Thank you very much, Lee, and I do not have any other question. Thank you.
Councillor Moldoni, do you have any questions? No. Councillor Rigby?
Oh, no.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, it was just regarding the complaints. I note that the children looked after Team 1 has increased in 2020. I wonder why that is, and also if you could explain what the differences in the different teams is, please.
Sorry, Councillor, are you on referring to on page 65?
Yes, sorry, page 65. Yes, yeah.
Okay, so there's been an increase in 2 complaints for the children's looked after team for this year compared to the previous year. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So there's been an increase in only 2. In terms of those, let's go down. If we go down to the upheld elements. So yeah. So the 3 complaints, all of those. I'm on page 66 now. So all of those 3 complaints were upheld for that particular team. And if you then follow that back to the learning on page 63, you can see some learning there for that particular team for those complaints. If I may, I'd probably best to hand over to the service to provide a response to what the difference is in relation to those teams, if I may, because I'm not quite sure.
Sure.
I think just based on the number of looked after children, obviously they're separated into particular teams. So there isn't any, if we look at CLA 1 and CLA 2, there isn't any difference, but obviously what we've put in is manageable caseloads and spans of control. So that's why we have different teams to make sure the caseloads are at an acceptable, workable level to support the children and do meaningful work and make sure that the spans of control are good for the managers to make sure the practice is of good standard as well. So I think the issue is just about where then complaints have come in that particular team, and obviously, as Lee's referred to, the learning has been identified that would be followed through with the team.
Do you have any further comment, Lee, on that? No. Councillor Rigby, do you have any further questions?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right, looks like there are no more questions, so we'll go to the recommendation. Scrutiny Committee, consider and know the report. I think that's been done. Is that agreed? Yeah. Okay, so we will move on to item 9 now. This is the SEND inspection outcome, written statement of actions update, and Michelle will be presenting this.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. I wanted to start, before I go into the report, just to recognise the work that both schools and the SEND service have been undertaking since schools went into lockdown in March and have just recently reopened in September, albeit we had them open for vulnerable children in the summer. And I think it's worth recognising that, because actually all parties have worked incredibly hard to ensure that actually all children, but particularly those with special educational needs, have had the levels of support that have been required. And I thought it was worth mentioning that at the outset, Chair, if I may. Let me take you to the report. So what I've provided is in Appendix 1, you'll see the written statement of action. It has been colour-coded, and at the bottom we've put in a number of progress updates. I don't intend to go through all of the progress updates. I'm hoping committee have had an opportunity to look. What I will pull out is the target around the 20 weeks for the completion of the EHCP plan has remained high, above national and above regional. And again, that is real testament to the work that everyone's been undertaking. So, as I said, against the written statement of action, colour-coded as was requested by committee last time, as well as a progress update beneath. Let me take you to the main report. What I wanted to do for committee was to really pull out the areas that clearly are still, causing us challenge. And actually, more importantly, what we're looking to do about that. So one of the things that's been a real challenge for us is engagement. CAPA, which was the Parent Carer Forum, decided that they were going to dissolve. That has meant it has been difficult, coupled with COVID, to actually do the amount of engagement work that we would have hoped. What I would say is we have been engaging with parents. Staff are talking to parents all the time. I recently did a meeting with parents around the Preparing for Adulthood strategy and got some really good feedback. So I want to reassure committee that there is a lot of activity going on. However, the recognised umbrella group has now dissolved. We have been in touch with the National Infrastructure Organisation, Contact, who have identified an associate for us. So the associate has now started and will be working with us to work with members of the community to start the development of a new Parent Carer Forum. I think it's worth recognising, and actually at the recent SEND board, the regional lead who sits on our SEND board recognises that the establishment of Parent Carer Forums take time. They take time to establish. So I think it's worth recognising that in committee, that these groups coming together, it takes time to get those developed. However, we are using any other means of engagement with parents, carers and young people. But I wanted to bring that to committee's attention. I think the other area for us is around the annual review process. This was something that was picked up by Ofsted. We recognise that we've had some historical challenges around that. We have increased capacity. Clearly, it says in the report, the authority's commitment to SEND is very clear. We have had significant resources to enable us to have more manageable caseloads, which will then enable staff to be able to do all of the functions of the role. If I could just say, colleagues, that prior to the new investment that we've had, staff were managing anything between sort of 300 to 350 cases each. That is not manageable. We're now down to, you've seen in the report with the staffing, down to around 150. So we're hoping to see some real acceleration around the annual review process. I think it's also worth saying to committee that when you're undertaking an annual review, it's also about engagement with the school, with the parent, with the team. So, there's quite a partnership approach to this. So, but we are, with the additional resources, expecting to make some inroads around the annual reviews and in the timely manner, which is what was picked up within Ofsted. The other area that I wanted to highlight was around the quality. We have got a quality audit group. I actually undertake audits, as do all the senior management team, as do a number of other colleagues, because this isn't just about us marking our own homework, of course, and that's important. We've got external colleagues to have a look at that for us as well. They're then reviewed on a quarterly basis. A report is due to go to the October SEND Improvement Board. So I wanted to highlight those areas. If we now go back, as I said, I'm not going to go through, it's an incredibly large document, with lots and lots of detail. So I think probably actually I'll leave it there, Chair, if I may, and open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. The first thing I wanted to comment on was the difference in caseload. I recall back in February committee, I think it was Councillor Rocanade that made the point that 300, 350 cases is not a good place to be in, and so it was really positive to see that in there. The question I had goes back to a thing from earlier regarding agencies working together. This document says a lot of times, partner agencies, key partners, etc., etc. Given that there are so many agencies working towards one aim, one goal, are you satisfied that the information sharing and the working that have been done across agencies so far has been effective and will be going forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, as you can see in the report, I think Thurrock has got a very strong partnership ethos, actually. We've got an incredibly strong partnership with our schools. You'll be aware, all bar a couple of our schools now are academies. We've developed very strong relationships with them. On our SEND improvement board, so at a strategic level, we've got schools represented, we've got health represented, we've got, you know, a whole range of partners coming together to oversee, you know, how we are on how we're doing actually on our improvement journey. I think one of the things that's always challenging in any multi-agency partnership is actually ensuring that you get that buy-in. And I want to reassure committee that we've got that. You know, we've got some really strong relationships with all of those partners. So to give reassurance, yes, I think it's part of Thurrock's ethos around his partnership working.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Are there any questions in the chamber? No? Yeah. Councillor Akinbowen.
Thank you. I just want to ask this quick question, Sheila, because you mentioned that you are engaging with parents. In this unprecedented time, can you give us a sample of how you have engaged with parents? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've used technology. So we've used Teams, we've used Zoom. In fact, Councillor Jeffries, who's the portfolio holder for education, and myself are meeting with a group of parents next week on Teams, actually. The recent one I've done was on Zoom. So we're using the technologies. I mean, clearly, at the moment, to try and meet face-to-face is very, very difficult for all the reasons that we've identified, but we are using the technologies. And actually, the other thing I often do is just ring people. So if there is something coming in, I'll just pick up the phone and get some information that way. So technology and just using the phone.
Councillor Akinbowen, would you like to respond?
Yes. And what about some parents that cannot afford technology such as phone or other means? How do you engage with them?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a challenge, isn't it, if people haven't got the technology. Clearly, when we're linked to schools, that's slightly easier because actually schools have got the technology and they have obviously socially distanced, made things available for those parents. I think the other thing, in a sense, they may not have the computers, but they will have telephones. So I guess the question, though, and it's a good one, is how you identify those parents. And, you know, what we're trying to do is make sure that we've got a range of mediums. We've got a very good engagement officer now who has actually been contacting parents, and I think you've seen some of that in the report, around the EHCP process. So the question is actually, how was that process? You know, what does that look like? And more importantly, is it right for your child? Because ultimately, there's a child at the centre of this, or a young person. So we have been utilising parents that have recently gone through the process to identify any points of learning and how we can embed that in practice going forward. But I suspect there will always be some parents where actually having the means to contact is challenging. And all we can do is keep offering out these events via our networks and try and encourage people to utilise what means they can to engage with us.
Thank you, Councillor Akinbowen. It looks like there's a hand up there for Councillor Muldowney.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Michelle, for this report. Thank you for this report. Yes, third time of asking, and I got an updated report in a good format that made it easy to judge what progress is being made. I hope I won't have to ask 3 times in future. Anyway, thank you for the report. It is what I expected to get the first time around, but we've got it now, so we'll move on from there. Yes, I can see that progress has been made in some areas, and I take on board that there have been challenges that have arisen from COVID. However, a lot of the areas that we are needing to move forward with seemed to have been disrupted by the dissolution of CAPA, the Parent Partnership Group. And I wondered what was the reason for CAPA dissolving?
Yeah, can I take that? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think part of the issue around parent forums, or actually any voluntary group, is you get a core group of people who put a lot of time and energy into what they're doing. And I think over time, the chair had done an amazing job. She'd worked really hard, but her son was at the upper age range. So, and I think what sometimes happens, and this is what happened in this case, I had a group of core committed parents. I think the chair decided, actually due to the fact that her son was actually at the upper age range, that she no longer felt that she could chair the group. I think the other thing that was going on at the time is, if you look at the timelines, a lot was going on around COVID, a lot was going on around anxiety, around, you know, what would happen, particularly if you've got vulnerable children. So I think the group decided at that point that they didn't have a natural successor as chair, and made the decision that actually it was best for the organisation at that point in time to dissolve. What I would say, Councillor, is that, again, picking up from our regional colleague, I think a number of local authorities have had similar things happen with their parent carer forum. And as I said, I would like to reassure committee that actually we have been engaging with parents. Certainly I've been on a number of calls. I've got one of my senior management team here on the call on the meeting tonight that also has regular contact with parents. So just to reassure committee that there is a lot of activity going on. And as I said earlier, we are now getting support from the National Infrastructure Organisation to develop a new parent carer forum.
Councillor Muldowney, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Michelle, for that. I understand what you're saying about the chair moving on, and that certainly was one of the reasons why CAPA disbanded. However, I've actually got the letter from CAPA explaining why they disbanded, and it says the parent carers representing CAPA have worked hard for the past 6 years to raise the profile of participation in Thurrock, and as a group we're proud of the work completed with Nicole Evans-Deere on the CAPA Engagement Framework and Action Plan, as we felt this was a truly co-produced document. It is with some regret to note that these documents received no feedback from the local authority or SEND team. The forum has felt frustrated that since the CQC Ofsted SEND inspection, the local authority have not recognised the knowledge and experience in the parent carer forum and have failed to understand the concept or value of co-production. This has been particularly disappointing, as we feel that this is in contrast to the relationship that we have had with the SEND team previously. This has been even more evident since the start of the COVID-19 crisis, when the local authority went ahead with changes to the HCP documentation, including us only at consultation stage, at which point we were unable to meet in person to discuss this fully, and were not given additional time to work on this together remotely. Given what you've said about Council's Thurrock's ethos of partnership working and how long it takes to establish a parent participation group, shouldn't we have worked a little bit harder to keep this one going? And how do you respond to what CAPA has said about the lack of engagement,
Michelle?
particularly since the Ofsted report?
Okay, thank you. Yes, we did receive the letter, and clearly there were elements of that made very difficult reading. I think it would be, at this point, there were a number of reasons why CAPA made their decision, and they weren't all actually put within the letter, and clearly it wouldn't be appropriate for me to make comment on that. I think the important thing here is that actually what CAPA were unable to do at that point was continue in the way that they had been continuing, because the chair had been very, very sort of integral to that. She'd been a key, really important part of that. She made the decision to resign, and the rest of the group didn't feel that they had a chair available. If I can just pick up on a couple of the points, though, and again, you know, when we're looking at change, when we're looking at changing paperwork, so part of what the discussion there was around the changes to the EHCP plan. We did an awful lot of work consulting with a range of partners around the changes to the EHCP plan. I recognise, and that included CAPA, and I'm really pleased to see, Councillor, that you did talk about Nicole, who's our engagement officer, who worked incredibly hard with CAPA around doing some of that engagement work. But coming back to the EHCP plan, when we looked at it, what we wanted to do was make it an easier document to actually engage with. One of the things that's really clear that comes out from national SEND colleagues is making sure that any paperwork is as clear as it can be. We felt at the time that actually it did need some change. CAPA were consulted on the paperwork. They were sent the information. Unfortunately, for a whole variety of reasons, they were unable to come back with any amendments. So we then looked at what else we needed to do around the paperwork. So it's disappointing that they felt that they weren't able or weren't involved in the consultation around that paperwork. And that is disappointing. And that's disappointing because actually I do think Thurrock has got a strong partnership ethos. So it's disappointing that they felt that, but to just reassure committee, they were asked their opinion on the paperwork. Now, if they felt, as they clearly did, which is what they articulated, that actually, you know, they'd come back within a different timeline, then that's a fair challenge, Councillor, and we need to accept that. And I do accept that as the senior officer within the SEND service.
Councillor Hall, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I just feel slightly obligated to defend officers somewhat here. As someone who spent 4.5 years as cabinet member for education, I would say that whilst we're grateful for the work of groups like CAPA, the local authority has got an obligation to consult beyond a single group. And I would say that, you know, in all candour, I've represented my Homestead seat for the last 10 years, about 7,000 electors. I can't honestly say that I've met every single one of them, or I can credibly say that I can represent every view at the same time. Officers have got 52 schools that we work with that are frequent consultees. So I think it's important that you capture as many diverse voices as humanly possible, and by and large, officers do an extremely good job of doing that.
Councillor Muldowney, would you like to come back?
Yes, first of all, I don't understand why Councillor Holden's talking on this. He's not a member of the committee, and he's already taken up committee time at the beginning.
I called on him.
Okay, well, that's your prerogative, but I mean...
Exactly, so...
what I will say, carrying on with what I was questioning before, I mean, I think that the failure to continue engagement with CAPA, which led to the dissolution, and then the lack of complete candour in the response about why it dissolved. I mean, there were clearly issues there beyond the ones that were first stated. The importance of engagement with parents to our SEND strategy priorities, current priorities, so ensuring that children and families are at the heart of an effective SEND system, and the amount of items that are delayed now that we've lost this good relationship with CAPA and that CAPA's gone. Also, the feedback that I've had from quite a few SEND families within the Thurrock community this has been quite a damaging thing to have happened. Obviously, we're moving forward now, but obviously it's going to take a while to re-establish a Thurrock parent participation group. I'm glad that work is being made on that. But as Michelle has said, it does take time to establish that. How are we going to make sure that we learn the lessons of what happened with Kappa so that this doesn't happen again? Thank you.
Sheila?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor. We work really hard to engage with parents and children and young people in the SEND service. We have invested in officers to actually work with engagement. And it was great sadness for us as well that the Kappa group decided, the current Kappa group decided that they didn't want to continue anymore. We have to move on from that position, and we are moving on from that position because there are a number of ways in which we do engage with both parents and children and young people who are involved in our SEND services. We also have a national organisation called Contact who are working with us to energise that group again. So it's not that we've not got any engagement, because we have got engagement, and we will build up another forum. And it will already be in place because we've got a number of, as I say, groups that we are engaging with. So it's really important to us that we do engage with parents and we do engage with young people. As I say, we have put dedicated resource into making that happen. You know, the lead member for that area is also working with meeting with parents. If, as I think you've just said, that you know a group of parents who are sort of saying to you that they're not satisfied at the moment, or they've got something they want to feed back, you know, we would be more than happy to speak to that group of parents. I know for myself and for Michelle and for Councillor Jeffries, if there was a meeting that you wanted to arrange, we'd be more than happy to meet with those parents and to talk about their experience of the service so that we can take that forward. So we're very keen to engage with, because we know that that's one of the most crucial ways for us in terms of developing and improving our services. So the commitment we give to the committee is that we're very much wanting to make sure that we do engage with both parents and children and young people directly, and we will do whatever we need to do to actually get a group going again. And if there are other groups of parents that you know of that we can engage with, we will make sure that we do that.
Councillor Maldoni, do you have any further questions?
Thank you. Yes, I did. If we look at page 98. I had a question about the actions B and C. Obviously, we got an extended time frame on those because of COVID, but that action was September 2020. I just wondered, why are they not coded red? Why are they still amber? Maybe you could give some guidance on that.
Michelle?
Okay, so they're not coded red because actually we have undertaken some stakeholder consultation around the indicators in the dashboard, Councillor, but we're just waiting, as I said, to take that to a group of parents. We would have taken that to Kappa, but unfortunately, as you've already identified, Kappa decided that they were going to no longer exist. So we're just waiting to ensure that we can take that to a group of parents. I think one of the things around how you colour code is actually read as no action at all, and clearly we have got a group of some indicators that we've developed, so we leave it at amber for that reason. And you talked about C, councillor, is that right? Was that your other query, please? Apologies.
Sorry, I'm muted. There were two there, weren't there, that were marked for September. Oh, here we are. September 2020. So it's B and C.
Yeah. So sorry, councillor. You were on mute, and I think I was still talking. So that's not great, is it?
Oh, right.
Anyway, never mind. So looking at B, we have got an interim dashboard that goes to the Send Improvement Board. Actually, we've just moved the Send Improvement Board to monthly, so it'll go on a monthly basis. What we also got, councillor, was a really good example of sort of a dashboard that had come from another local authority from the regional lead. So what we're doing is we're looking at how we can integrate other indicators within our dashboard, and that would also include things like participation. So if committee actually, is a question actually for committee, if you'd like to see that, we can bring that as an example, which would enable you to look at how we're looking at indicators and how we're performing against that. But clearly that's a committee decision.
Councillor Muldowney, do you have any further questions?
Yes, I did want to just dig a little bit more into the detail. Those areas where we're looking at an October 2020 deadline, how confident are you that we're going to achieve those by that timeline, please?
Michelle?
So, councillor, all of that work has started. So we've started that work. So, and I think like anything that we're doing in this document, we have started. So we will look to meet the timeframes. Clearly, if I look at some of these, if we're thinking about engagement and communication, we've drafted an overarching strategy around that, which will then have a range of action plans beneath it, because clearly, as we've said, ensuring that we are getting the voice. But more importantly, actually, it's not just about getting the voice, is it? It's about making sure we're acting on what's being said, because, you know, you can get a lot of feedback, can't you? But if actually we're not acting on that feedback, then clearly that will become quite a frustration for people who've taken their time to feedback. So we are confident that we will be able to have those documents. The integrated commissioning framework, that has gone to the Send Improvement Board, and we're now working on the detail around how that will operate.
Sheila?
I'd just like to add to what Michelle said, that we have a series of operational groups and strategic groups that review all of the actions, and that if there's going to be any issues with them or any blockages with them, then those groups have got multi-agency people on them so that it can move them forward. So those actions are constantly monitored. If we put October, then we feel that that's what we should be achieving. If there's going to be a problem with that, then we review that and work out what the issue is, and then we update the action plan. So we've made an undertaking for each overview and scrutiny committee to produce the action plan, so you'll be able to see each time what we've said we were going to do, how we've done that, and if there's been a problem, what the problem is, and how we're getting ourselves back on course.
Councillor Muldowney.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sheila. And that is very clear from this report, which I'm glad to see it in this format. Just finally, I'm glad to see that there are areas where we have completed actions and those actions are embedded. You know, I just wanted to finish on a positive note. So, for example, in the area of concern 1 in A1 about management oversight, all of those actions have been completed and embedded, which is fantastic. And the action E is ongoing monitoring, which is great. What I was wondering, now we've got those changes in place and made, could you give us an example of what would be the discernible difference for SEND children and families?
Okay, so certainly what was picked up in Ofsted was around some management oversight. So clearly having the realignment of the senior management team has enabled greater oversight, but it's also enabled us to ensure that we're meeting timeframes around the EHCP process. So as you can see, and as I reported earlier, we're above national and regional figures around completion of the EHCP process. It's also noted that actually one of the other things that Ofsted discussed with us was around ensuring that we knew all about our specialist provision. We've done a lot of work around ensuring that we know where all of our children and young people are, we know what they're engaging in, and more importantly, and again, bringing it back to the child and the young person, actually how they're achieving. You know, how are they doing in their educational offer? And it's not just about, it's the more holistic approach around, you know, that's their educational offer, but what's the wider spectrum of how this child's life is progressing?
Sheila?
Thank you. And just adding to what Michelle's saying, so the fact that the EHCPs are happening in a more timely way means children's needs are being met quicker, and they're being identified in a way that means that we can then take forward what's required for them. And that's a definite improvement since Ofsted came to us and gave us these written statement of actions, and has direct positive impact on children and young people.
Councillor Moldoni, are there any further questions you would like to ask?
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sheila, and thank you, Michelle.
Councillor Okanade.
Thank you, Chair. Wow. Sort of the last sort of a question that is remaining, because there's been a lot of talk on this on this action plan. The action under the SEND data integration project, that is on page 95. On the introduction of online EHC, and that has really not started, and I should believe that that would be very helpful to speeding up the process of developing EHC plans, especially during the current circumstances brought about by social distancing and COVID. So I just wonder, because that the deadline would have been March, is that 2020? But could you tell us what is the progress on this one? When is this to be expected? Thank you.
Of course, Councillor, thank you. So the data integration project is in 3 stages. So the first stage was around the data integration. So that was about bringing 2 systems together. That was bringing SEND and the rest of education and skills together. And we've achieved that. That happened. We went live on that on the 1st of September, which is really good news, because it now means staff across education and skills have got a view, a single view, and we haven't got 2 systems running. So that part of the integration programme has been completed. Clearly, when we started talking to the provider, Serverlec, what they identified was that actually to develop the portal would take a longer time frame. It's quite a complex integration piece of work, actually. So we went to the SEND Improvement Board last week, the week before, and we talked about, where the time goes actually, and we talked about the next phase on of our integration work, which will be the portal. What I would say is that, again, coming from our regional lead, we're one of the few local authorities that have actually, gone down the route of investment in the portal, but it will take time. And I think, quite frankly, when we first did this, I don't think we recognised the actual time it takes around the development of the online portal. But you're quite right, Councillor, to say that actually if we can get the portal up and running, and the time frame is significant actually, we're just finalising the final timescale. But if we can get that up and running, it will incredibly help. It'll actually transform how we can undertake the process of EHCP plans. So I think phase 1 is complete. We've gone live, which is really positive. We're now working on phase 2 and phase 3 of the project.
Councillor Okonade, would you like to respond?
Oh, yeah. So thank you. So that means that the March date is unrealistic. And my sort of follow-up question would be, in terms of training parents so that you can get information from them, how are you going to go about doing that? Is that going to be done by the provider of the portal, or is just explain how you're going to go about doing that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, this will be cultural change. So this is quite transformational change around the online EHCP portal. And what we were discussing at the SEND Improvement Board was recognising that we needed to bring groups of people together to work with us on that in the spirit of co-production, which we're, always wanting to promote. We're going to be asking parents to work with us on that so that we can look at ways in which we can work with both parents, because you're quite right, Councillor, there's a professional part of the system, and then there'll be the parents part of the system and young people. So we're going to bring groups of colleagues together to really work with us on this programme. As I said, exciting transformation programme.
Councillor Okonade?
No further questions. Thank you, Michelle.
Sally, have you got a question?
I'd like to really bring something to your attention. You've spoken a lot about engagement with parents. I don't know if you're aware that on your, when a parent applies for an EHCP, on your refusal letter, you don't detail how a parent can appeal that decision. There's no link to the tribunal website, which is quite concerning, because I think parents have a right to appeal a decision made, and you're making a complicated process more complicated by not detailing that in the letters that you send out to parents.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll check that out and ensure that that's changed if that is the case. Thank you.
So further on from that, what are you going to be doing about all the parents that have recently applied for an EHCP and have had a refusal that may be now at a loss of how to appeal? Will you be contacting them? Because a lot of parents, it's quite a complex process, and if they aren't able to articulate how to appeal, how are you going to manage that? Because what I'm concerned is there's going to be a lot of parents that aren't going to appeal because they don't know how to, and their children are going to fall through the net. When we do know there are children who require support, whose parents have often required support in that manner as well.
Sheila?
Thank you for that question, and we're absolutely concerned here that we should make sure that parents do have access to the information that they need in order to make an appeal. We'll go back and check the paperwork, and if it turns out that the paperwork hasn't got that information on it, then yes, we will follow up and make sure that everyone understands their right to appeal. We'll let the committee know what the outcome of that inquiry is. But absolutely, we do want to make sure that parents do know that if they want to appeal against a decision, that they have a right to do so and how they go about doing that. So we will take that away, and we'll make sure that if it's not happening, we will rectify it, and we'll let the committee know what the answer is.
I couldn't 100% confirm it's not happened. and I've been informed that the letter templates have now been adapted, but that was from an email today. So what my concern is, how many parents have received the letter without the information in that's required? That's what my concern is. Are you going to go back and track all those parents and contact them and ensure that they've got the information that they need?
Now that you've raised that with us, we will go back and we will make those checks. And if there are families who received a letter that didn't have that information on it, then yes, we will go back and make sure that they understand their rights.
Linda?
I can't say with 100% certainty that there's a link to the tribunal, but I am 99.9% certain that there is a reference to how they can get in touch with tribunal. There is certainly something on that letter that tells them what they can do next. I don't think it's a link, as you're suggesting, straight to the to Newcastle, to the tribunal board, but there is something on the letter that does guide the parents forward.
It is the link to the tribunal that is missing. There is information regarding contacting the global mediation company, but it's the actual link to the tribunal and to complete the appeal online that is missing.
Okay, well, officers have undertaken to make inquiries on that and get back to us. Are there any further questions on your part, Sally?
No, that was it. Thank you. I just wanted to raise that so everybody's aware that needs to be actioned.
Councillor Rigby, did you have your hand up?
No, sorry, no, it's not.
Okay, are there any... Linda?
Can I just say that, of course, every parent's got the right to go to tribunal, but I think in the essence of working in partnership, that I'm going to use the word better route forward is actually to mediation first, because often what we find is that when there is further information, then there is an agreement to assessment and that we can negotiate a way forward. So going to something like a tribunal, which is potentially confrontational, is not always the best way in the spirit of partnership to go forward. And mediation and talking and, you know, expressing a view that why hasn't it been approved is for me a much more partnership way of going forward.
Thank you for that, Linda. Are there any other questions from the chamber or from teams? No. We'll go to the one recommendation. ONS to scrutinise the work that has been undertaken during this period and offer challenge and support. I think we've done that. Can everyone agree to that? Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to the next item, Thurrock School Wellbeing Service. I think this is you as well, Michelle.
Actually, you're going to have a change of voice. So Malcolm's online. So Malcolm's going to take this item.
Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm Malcolm Taylor. I'm the strategic lead for specialist support and the principal educational psychologist for Thurrock. So the report you've got in front of you is an overview report. It's a summary of the work that's taken place for the Schools and Wellbeing Service over the past year. Clearly, that's been affected by COVID, as you will see identified in the report. It's just worth noting, obviously, the Schools Wellbeing Service was established to provide an advisory and support service for schools and came out of the Mental Health Summit that we held previously. So the key achievements, obviously, over the period of time have been the appointment of staff and the initial work they've carried out with schools. But it's worth noting, because those points are actually identified within the report, that during the pandemic lockdown, the Children's School Wellbeing Service and the Education Psychology Service have worked closely together to establish a telephone helpline for schools and for parents, and also to provide various pieces of information out to schools during that time. Other key areas are to note really is the work that the Schools Wellbeing Service have done linking across with our NELF services, our health services, that is, for each of the UM services, and also with the third sector with Open Door and with other providers. So there's a more unified approach across the various mental health services in Thurrock. So they've met with the schools, they've established action plans with the schools, and they've provided advice and information. I think particularly of importance is the establishment of the school wellbeing leads actually within every school. So we've now got a named contact for a school wellbeing lead. And historically, we've sort of worked through a number of different contacts. It might have been the head teacher, it might have been a pastoral leader, in some cases the SENCO. But there's an identified lead now in all the schools, which has really helped in terms of getting those messages across, particularly obviously as we've been working on additional support around COVID as well. So the Schools Wellbeing Service have offered reflective sessions with those members of staff and with other members of staff who found the situation particularly difficult. They've also done some joint work with Mind, producing some more materials around that. And again, committee may be aware of the government recovery programme that's in place. There has been some funding allocated to local authorities through that, and a set of materials have been developed along with the Anna Freud Centre, and we've undertaken the training. That's just literally been rolled out in the last couple of weeks. So we've got a senior educational psychologist I've got who's leading on that as part of the educational psychology service, alongside a member of the Schools Wellbeing Service, and we'll be rolling out that training of program of training over the next half term, as that's just the training is just literally being finalised at the moment. So I suppose that gives an overview, really. The detail is in the report that Gemma has prepared for you. And I think there's a couple of questions in there as well that we'd like you to consider as to how you'd like the service to report. Clearly, COVID has impacted on some of the direct impact of the service, but there are other things that have taken place while we've been doing that. And the other thing, sorry, I should have mentioned, of course, is that an important part of this service was to make sure we had good information and good pupil and student engagement around the programme. So part of this work was to work with the schools to make sure that those engagement activities were taking place as well. And we were reflecting back on that through the Brighter Futures survey, which is an important survey, but as part of public health, where we get a lot of data on key issues for children in school and at college to identify what their concerns are. And we've obviously added into some of those checks particular questions around COVID as we continue to work with some of those children and young people. Thank you.
Thank you for presenting that, Malcolm. It was a particularly interesting read. I was impressed to hear of the telephone service that you set up as a result of COVID. I thought that was really great. Have you had any feedback? Was it well used? Was it well received?
It started off. It was something that we looked at because we obviously looked at the way in which psychology services nationally were responding to the crisis and linking into our various sort of regional, national links, and also other equivalent school wellbeing services. Yes, it was a slightly slow start with it. We established it. We had a rota of staff, and we put out other additional information at the time. But after a relatively slow start, it certainly picked up. We've had quite a few contacts through it, and particularly it's somewhere where other services are guiding schools and parents in order to have a longer conversation or discuss some of those issues. So it has been particularly useful. I don't have the data in front of me on the exact number of calls, but it's certainly found useful, and it's also been a link into other conversations and discussions. So obviously we've had throughout the pandemic with the Schools Wellbeing Service talking to staff, and we've obviously also had the educational psychologist for the school picking up with meetings as well. And there's been some of that has been facilitated through virtual meetings, but the actual telephone line itself has offered an opportunity to have more time and more space to reflect on those sessions. And again, sometimes school staff identified particular members of staff who they'd like to have an opportunity to get some more supervision and support through the school's wellbeing service. I think it's interesting that over a relatively short space of time before lockdown, they're able to establish some quite good links with those school wellbeing leads. So they had the confidence actually to contact those school wellbeing leads directly and seek out that additional support and supervision, which has been going on. And that's an ongoing programme. So that's more than just sort of providing a training around a particular area, but it's actually picking up on their concerns themselves, talking through the sort of staff anxieties. And I should note, of course, that we're very aware as a local authority, the very significant impact that the COVID arrangements have had on all staff across all our schools. And that includes the senior management teams and the head teachers who have been through an incredibly stressful situation in terms of not only the direct work in schools, but the additional issues that have come to them as a result of that situation. So it's been providing a space for them really to talk through some of their issues and concerns as well. And that's always an open sort of process, either with the psychology service or with the school's wellbeing service, where those links are in place.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the chamber? Councillor Ackenbach.
Thank you, Chair. Please, can you please clarify to me, when students are not on, is there any way they get the same, help from your department?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the beginning of that. Was that when the children are at home, what support they're getting?
Yes.
Thank you. So the support has been primarily through obviously the contact with the school. So in the first instance, parents would discuss the concerns the children are experiencing directly with the school. And through that, the school will raise that situation either with the school psychologist or with the school's wellbeing service if there's a need for further support. And that has been the case on a number of occasions where schools have contacted us informing us particular difficulties where children are having. But I should also note that we work very closely with the UM service. So where there are identified high level of mental health needs, and that may be through anxiety or other areas, that goes through the single point of access there, we would pick, obviously that service would go through their triage process and they'd pick up those cases, but they'd also feed back to the schools with advice to contact others, because schools are using a range of different services, including some counselling services which the school may have employed themselves, or it may be that they've had a contract with places like Open Door. So it is possible to pick those children up and to provide support for them at home. In fact, the feedback we had right at the beginning of this was for some children, they actually found, particularly for the higher level needs and particular groups of young people, that they found it easier to do some of that discussion and I suppose counselling support through a digital medium, and actually have some of their sessions with UMs digitally, because they felt more in control of that. They fed back and they felt that they didn't have sometimes the social complications and the anxiety that a direct one-to-one meeting would lead to. So there have been some successes in that, and obviously we'll continue to talk with schools about children who may be anxious at home, who may need additional support outside that, and making sure they've got access to those services, and a range of different ways in which children can access services where they're at home and they need to be able to talk things through. And of course, we've also got a broader digital offer through our Couth Online services. These are services that are already established that are linked into schools. So there are other ways in which children can get access through other support arrangements that are again promoted by the schools and were promoted through the conference in the first place. I hope that answers.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you for that. Have you seen an increase this year compared to last year?
It's very difficult to give a clear picture on the overall situation. There has been some interesting research that we're getting in both regionally and nationally that is indicating there has been an increase in referrals, an increase in anxiety, often for very specific areas. As I mentioned a moment ago, interestingly, certain groups of children have seemed to have coped better with this than others, but we are still at a very early stage of this to be able to give any very clear evidence as far as that position is concerned. But we have seen an increase in some of the referrals to counselling services, though on the whole, actually the concern we've had has been the immense pressure on staffing and on some of the issues that we've obviously talking through in supporting parents within the schools, whereas a lot of children have coped very well indeed and have actually come back into school and have been keen to sort of get on with things without necessarily showing the level of anxiety. But we have got a national programme of training and support for schools and recovery that's going in that I mentioned a moment ago. And obviously through that, we'll also be talking to schools about the sorts of issues that they're identifying. What we would always do in this sort of situation, whether it's a critical incident, whether it's a one-off major instance of school, or whether it's a national situation like we have now, where obviously children have been out of school for a long period of time, is we'd make sure that we're building the resilience within the school system as the first point of contact, so that teachers are beginning to identify where those children have particular difficulties and needs. And we would expect that to settle down as things normalise a bit in school, and school children get used to those sort of, albeit change routines, but the sort of access they have to their friends and to their teachers again. And coming out of that at the other end, we would then expect to pick up children who may have had experienced some longer term difficulties, and we prioritise those through the school, and sometimes we'll talk directly to the NEL services to be able to identify it. So we are seeing an increase, but I'm cautious about giving an overall picture at the moment because it is still very early days. Having said that, of course, there are going to always be one or two of the greater clinical real need where we've got children presenting with very high levels of anxiety, young people particularly presenting with high anxiety, that may well have been exacerbated by the difficulties in accessing the sorts of support networks they would normally have, whether it's their friendship groups or whether it's links through school or college. And for those, obviously, we're talking to parents, talking to the providers rather on a regular basis to make sure that those youngsters are being picked up and they're being triaged into the appropriate services so that we're picking them up. But that's a small number that are very much at the higher level of need, and there is an awareness around those children's difficulties where they've had particular difficulties that they've discussed in school.
Councillor Ekenbarn, do you have any further questions?
Thank you for that. My last question is, should there be any high level of, help? Is there any way that you'll be supporting the school to be able to cope with the, should there be high level of students looking for support? Is there any way the school will cope with those, with the level of the people that will be coming forward?
There's certainly in terms of the level of need that's being identified in schools at the moment. As things go, there has been an increase in some of the referral rates, but we're picking that up with schools as we go through. And at the moment, yes, it is a significant demand, and there are significant strains and stresses on all services. We're probably quite lucky in Thurrock that because we had already established this schools wellbeing service, we had an additional level of support, or an additional tier of support in place to pick up some of those concerns and to build the resilience in schools in terms of the training and support. And these new recovery programs that have come on that said they've been supported by the Anna Freud Centre, and obviously working with Mind. And I had a look at the materials from a link I have with the national group over the summer, and I think they've been well thought out in order to make sure that those support networks are in place for schools, and they're picking up on the sorts of issues that we'd expect them to. But yes, there will always be an issue around capacity and challenge within schools that has certainly been exacerbated over the period of lockdown, and we are aware of a significant increase in requests for services, whether that's psychology services across the board, but also obviously the school wellbeing service. And we are looking obviously at our capacity to make sure that we're able to pick up and support schools. But a lot of that will be resilience building as much as it is the direct work we carry out with individual children, with groups of children. But we have worked with the schools wellbeing service also to develop additional services for children 16 to 18, where they are particularly at risk of anxiety or difficulties, because we wanted to identify vulnerable groups within that area that might want to have access to a further level of support.
Thank you.
Councillor Muldowney, do you have any questions?
I do, Chair. I didn't have my hand up, but yeah, I do actually. Just one clarification, please. I mean, obviously, I welcome this service, and I take on board what you've been saying about the different effects on different children. I know you can have one child who actually found it quite nice to be off school. It was like an extended summer holiday, and there's certainly other children where it has made them absolutely miserable and provoked very high levels of anxiety because they're not able to see their friends. So I'm glad to hear that the leads in the schools were actually established before lockdown, and that there's a programme that is looking at building resilience within the school staff. So obviously that's very important, as well as capacity, for issues to be identified and brought to your attention. The one clarification that I just wanted was on page 121. So there were some interventions that were made. They all look good, but then in line with the evaluation, the service was advised to pause the delivery of interventions until the baseline Brighter Future survey had been delivered to all schools. 26 schools had been delivered to prior to the schools closing. Obviously that was interrupted by the COVID lockdown. I'm just wondering, has that started again? And when will the completion of that, or are we still subject to restrictions that are stopping that process completing?
We've had discussions with the people at the university who were actually carrying out the overview. In fact, it was an overview of the service itself. It was a service evaluation. There's talk about the Brighter Future survey in there. We paused the Brighter Future survey when we had a certain number, but we're actually putting the Brighter Future survey in now. So we've actually been doing that back in with schools. I think the complication was with the evaluation was initially we were wanting to work with linked in with the University of East Anglia, around a project which was going to be a comparative project. We were going to have two control groups, as you would want to do in best possible evaluation research, obviously, and have a slower start with one group and a faster start so we could get like comparative data. We decided, and obviously we're looking at this over lockdown as well, not to do that type of comparative study because the impact on the service delivery would be too great at this stage, given what we've gone through with the COVID and the impact that's already taken place at those timescales. So we're actually looking at a pre-post evaluation study instead now, and actually moving forward with all the schools at the same pace to get the interventions in place. In terms of the Brighter Future survey, that's the focus at the moment. Because we're doing the other training and support with these new materials, the main focus of the team is to get that Brighter Future survey completed this term. It is proving very difficult because of the numbers and because of access to IT suites and all the rest of it, which has complicated the survey. That we've had some staff in the past going out and actually assisting some of the PSHE lessons to actually run the survey. So we're taking a sensible look at that and being pragmatic about what we can get out of it. It's an important survey for us in terms of information, but obviously the most important fact is that we're actually getting the other support in. So we're doing that for this term and the beginning of next term, and then but at the same time we're continuing to offer the schools that access to other support arrangements through the training. And then of course the training programs will kick in significantly again within the spring and summer terms next year to get further opportunities. And again, it's balancing that, of course, with what the schools are actually able to respond to at the moment, because clearly they're working on a huge range of issues. We don't want to over bombard with them. We want to offer the right level of support based on their current need. So at the moment, it's a bit of a balancing job here. And I think we've got it about right with both the survey and with the evaluation, but we had to take some quite significant changes to the structure of the evaluation, knowing that it wouldn't give us quite what we wanted in the first place, but just in order to make sure we were getting the better outcomes and focusing on the delivery. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yes, it does. It's and that sounds like a good approach to have that flexibility. I can echo certainly from what I've seen. The head teachers that I've seen, that they're under incredible stress, the whole staff team are at the moment. And I would like to echo your praise of what's happening in schools at the moment. Certainly all teachers and head teachers having to deal with an incredibly high workload, and they're doing a good job. So thank you.
Councillor Rugby.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just really regarding the numbers of children that had sort of referred themselves directly or via their parents compared to those who had been referred by teachers or professional bodies. Is there any data to sort of tell the percentage of those two areas?
I think it would be quite difficult to extract the data at this stage, because I think for most of the children, certainly in school, obviously they've been picked up by the concerns raised either by year heads through into those leads, and they've then contacted the service. But the self-referrals, we've had more parents probably referring in terms of self-referrals than we've had students, but there are other ways in which students can also get access to other services through some of those other agencies I mentioned, like the Couth Online and the other online counselling. I mean, I think the concern we had, obviously, particularly for some of the adolescents, was the impact that COVID was having in terms of their social relationships, because that's such a major support system for them. Most teenagers, they get their support by testing out their their ideas and discussing their anxieties with their friends. Now, of course, they've still had that virtual support through their friends with their phones and all the rest of it, but actually not having that direct support is a concern. But we haven't got any good data on that at the moment, and certainly not in terms of those referrals. I think the higher level referrals tend to be identified either by the school staff themselves or by parents actually contacting the school and saying this has been the particular issue they wanted to talk through, and that's why they would want to have some contact with the service. And sometimes it's advice for parents as much as it is actually talking to the child themselves. Obviously, though, I always have to give the caveat that given any very high level of concern around any child or young person's mental health, we'd always make sure that's referred on to the services such as the UM service to make sure that we can do the triage there to make sure there's a proper risk assessment in terms of any risks to their well-being. Thank you.
Councillor Rigby, do you have any further questions?
No, thank you very much.
Councillor Okanade.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Malcolm, for taking us through this report. My question is on the key performance indicators on page 219, and where it says that all schools are to complete the mental health action plan. And it seems that you've currently got 80%. And I mean, 20% may be a small number, but it could be the actual number that means that some children that really need the service are not accessing the service. So how are you going to, and regardless of COVID or no COVID, because in fact the issue is much more important now during this period that we're in. So how are you going to get that level up? Because we should expect to see 100% of schools that are responding to this the plan, you know. So we should actually see 100% so that we know that there's no children that is missing this essential service. So yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, a very good point. And clearly the figures on the action plans were affected by the work that started with the schools and then was impacted by COVID and by the other issues we've mentioned. So it certainly is the intention of the service to make sure there is 100% on those action plans. Because they're recorded at the moment 80%, I wouldn't want to give the impression that there isn't any action around well-being or mental health in the schools. It's just that it wasn't felt when looking at the work that had taken place that there was a completed action plan that could be published and identified by the school's well-being service. But schools themselves would have their own plans, obviously linked into their safeguarding and linked in with their other support range of schools, to make sure they were evidencing how they were looking after children's welfare. But it will be an issue for us to go back to any of those schools where there are questions around their plan, even for those who have completed, but we want to actually go back and look at some of the detail, or those where we haven't had a completed plan, to make sure it is completed, as schools have signed up to that commitment to make sure they go through that. And I think it's possibly been just the fact that we haven't completed those. There may have been staffing issues with those schools at a certain time in order for the paperwork not to have been completed or not. We certainly haven't picked up from any school that we have concerns about them not addressing this as an issue or not taking part in the discussions we've had around this as an issue. And that includes, obviously, during lockdown, Sheila has had regular discussions with the chief executives of all our academies, which gives us a good representation of the head teachers. And of course, these sort of issues have been picked up in discussion as well to make sure that schools are thinking about the welfare of the pupils and how they're going to ensure that as they return to school, that any well-being issues are being picked up. And I think schools have happily fed back on that in terms of where they are.
Councillor Okanade, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much for the response. I should just hope that this can be done, soonest, so that we ensure that nobody is missing out of this service. Thank you. There's no further question.
Thank you, Councillor Okanade. I don't think there are any more questions left. So if we go to the recommendations, the first one states Children's Overview and Scrutiny to identify how they would like the new team to report back. Are there any comments, suggestions from committee on that? No. Well, Malcolm, can I suggest that a member of the team come back on a quarterly basis and provide an update to committee?
Yes, of course, happy to do that.
Brilliant. Can we agree that recommendation then? Agreed. Recommendation 1.2, children's overview and scrutiny to note the work that has taken place. I think we've done that. Yep. Brilliant. Before we move on to the last agenda item, it is approaching 9 now, so are members content to suspend standing orders? Yep. So the last agenda item, or second to last, number 11, council tax exemption for foster carers. Joe.
Thank you. I find it a great pleasure to come here today to talk about the proposal for council tax exemption. I think it's quite an innovative approach about looking to think how can we recruit local foster carers to support local children. I think that is really important around what we're trying to do. I think what it does is the proposal gives a very clear message to our foster carers of how we value them. And I think we do value them, and this is an opportunity to acknowledge all of the work that they have done through the pandemic to keep our young children safe. So I think that's a key factor. And I think for a message to value our children, I think so. The proposal here today is to look at the council exemption. The paper itself covers the criteria. It looks at what are the benefits of changing this approach. It gives us what I believe is a unique selling point in respect of how we can sort of recruit foster carers. In the paper, it identifies the areas around the country that have adopted this approach and what the benefits of that are. It shows us that none of the local authorities surrounding us in the eastern region have adopted this approach, and I think it really is a beneficial aspect that we can sort of adopt and have some really gives us an edge to try and recruit foster carers going forward. In addition to that, what it does is will potentially reduce the pressure on the budget, because obviously in the paper you'll see the difference between the in-house costs for in-house foster carers against the independent fostering agencies. So that is a factor. And what we are trying to do is improve the numbers, as you can see from the paper about the numbers of the independent foster care agencies that we have, and swinging that to more in-house, because I think that would be best for the children initially, and it will have a financial benefit for us as the council going forward. So, I'm mindful there were some earlier discussions, but I do feel quite passionate. This is a good paper. I think this is a good proposal, and will have some benefits if we can invest in that. And obviously you can see the outline within the report of the next 3 years about what we're looking to achieve, and what is, we're looking to recruit 20 foster carers per year. I think that's aspirational. That's what we want to do. We want the support of the council, if possible, to try and sort of implement this, obviously, and that's why I'm here today, trying to get the approval from Overview and Scrutiny to move forward and approve this paper. But it's a short paper, so I'm sure everybody's had an opportunity to read it, and I think it is quite self-explanatory. But if I sort of stop there and take any questions.
Thank you, Joe. I just have a brief comment on my part, and that is to say that I think it's a fantastic paper. I think it's a fantastic scheme. You look at the amount of money that our foster carers will be saving. A Band E property, £1,600. So I'd just like to thank officers and the portfolio holder for bringing this to committee, bringing this to Thurrock. As you mentioned, there aren't really any other authorities around us that are doing this. I think is a fantastic scheme, and thank you for that. Are there any questions in the chamber on this report? No? On Teams, have we got Councillor Muldowney?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Although I haven't got any objections to foster carers, to supporting foster carers, and if this can help us recruit additional foster carers, that's definitely a great benefit. But I do wonder, I've got slight concerns about fairness, because as far as I can see, this isn't going to be a means tested benefit. Is that true?
I think that if you look through the paper, you'll see there's aspects where certain foster carers already receive a certain level of benefit. So it's just about there'd be a top up to that. So it would be based upon the foster carers and what is their entitlement around their current council tax.
Sorry, I'm still not quite clear. I mean, could we be given? This is all foster carers that are in borough will get this exemption based on being a foster carer. It's not means tested in the traditional sense.
That's correct.
That's correct. So we might get people who have significant incomes being able to apply for this discount. I'm just a little concerned that we're heading into a period where we're going to see high levels of unemployment. We're probably going to see, inevitably, we're going to see more people on benefits, more people who are going to want to apply for the council tax discount scheme. And I just want some reassurance that this offer to foster carers is not going to affect our ability to give discounts to those families who may be in dire financial need in the near future and the immediate to long term.
Sheila?
This is a proposal that's only about Thurrock foster care, so it doesn't affect anyone else in the community in terms of their benefits or their ability to claim benefits. The important thing about this proposal is that we're really, really keen to make Thurrock at the forefront of recruiting families to be foster carers for Thurrock children. And we are aware of the issues around what may be happening going forward around employment. And we would certainly encourage those families that have ever considered or thought about being foster carers to put themselves forward. There's a very rigorous recruitment process, and it takes between 4 and 6 months before you get approved as a foster carer and can then have children placed with you. So it's not a case of people just thinking, there's a way there of having my council tax paid for me. There's a very rigorous process, and we do want more families who live within Thurrock to consider being foster carers and to put themselves forward and for us to be able to assess them. Our current foster carers are thrilled to be recognised in this way because they do an amazing job for our children, and this is a further benefit that we're offering in Thurrock that will put us ahead in terms of when we go out to recruit. It shows the commitment of this council towards people who will open their homes and their hearts to children who need it in Thurrock.
Councillor Muldowney, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I wasn't questioning at all the idea behind rewarding foster carers. I think I did hear in there that giving this benefit is not going to affect other people who would be entitled to the council tax discount scheme applying. I think I did hear that in there somewhere. Can you just confirm that, please, Sheila?
Yes, Councillor Muldoon. This is a specific benefit for people who want to become Thurrock foster carers, and there's certain conditions in there about having children placed with them. That does not impact on other members of the community that might have a claim on other benefits. It's totally separate.
Councillor Muldowney?
Yes, thank you. It's just really in response to Councillor Howden's earlier comments about having to make tough budget decisions. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to impact. Obviously, we are going to have lower levels we're going to have higher levels of people needing to be supported by the council tax discount scheme. So I just wanted to make absolutely sure of that point. Thank you.
Councillor Rigby, is that a hand up? I can see. Yeah. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, just to say that I think it's an excellent plan, and it will, as it says in the report, it will save money long term. If we can get more carers in the area. So I do think it's a great idea, and I think it is also a good idea financially as well.
Councillor Okonade.
Thank you, Chair. I do understand the rationale behind this in terms of promoting local carers or potential carers to come forward. And I know it's just for the borough, but like Councillor Alden did say earlier, obviously we are discussing this, and you may want to think about this, because I'm sure there are, some of our children are cared for out of the borough due to necessity of changing the environment. And the carer that do not live in the borough, but they do care for our children, I just wonder if how do they feel, or would you think that they will feel if they're not benefiting from something like this? Thank you.
Joe?
I just wanted to make clear, really, that the current in-house foster carers, regardless whether they live in Thurrock or outside, will, if it's approved, will get the council tax exemption. And when we are recruiting foster carers in the future, there'll be very clear boundaries and guidelines about who qualify going forward. I think it was very important that we sort of acknowledge all of the good work that's done from the in-house foster carers locally, and ones that are just outside, if you like, that 20-mile boundary as well. So,
Councillor Okonade, would you like to come back on that?
Yes, please. It's not clarified. Are you saying that carers who are out of the borough that they don't have responsibility to pay the council tax to Thurrock, are you saying they will also benefit from this? I'm not really getting a clear picture of what you're saying, Joe.
Joe?
Yes, I'm making it sort of clear is that the cost, the saving of the £1,600 they would qualify for that, whether they live physically in Thurrock or outside. So they're not being penalised in any way, because they're providing the same service to the young people at this point. So everybody that's currently in that's providing support and has provided support for 26 weeks over the last 12 months will qualify for this allowance.
Councillor Okonade?
So it's going to be paid as an allowance for them to pay their council tax, or is it an exemption from Thurrock to pay council tax, as well as I don't know how is this gonna be worked out? Is it an allowance, or is it council tax exemption?
If people live outside the borough, it's a council allowance, which we sort of identified within the report. But what we've done is we capped that payment up, because to give an example, if you were a foster carer and you lived in Brentwood, then the cost of council tax would be higher. But that's what we're seeing to give that clear transparency across the board, is that figure of what we've gone, the 1,605, I think from memory, is that's what they would qualify for. So if there was a shortfall, they would have to top that up in their own council area.
Councillor Okonade.
Okay, that leads me to this question: that are you going to be promoting foster carers to come from Thurrock? How are you going to be doing that if this is allowance that you give to potential carers in Thurrock? Well, that the potential carers in Thurrock will get, because you're trying to bring them in, which is a very good idea, obviously, in terms of promoting that we have more carers. So if then you are giving allowance to outsiders as well, I mean, I may be asking a sort of conflicting question, but it's just not too clear to me how you're going to, how you're promoting that. You wanted more carers to come from Thurrock, and then I mean, obviously, I wouldn't want people that are caring for our children outside borough just because it's a necessity, because sometimes we do, like you understand, we do want to get them cared for outside the borough because of some complexity of like environment that you want to keep them away from and all that. So I don't know, is my question clear? How are you going to be promoting the potential local carers to come forward?
If I just clarify that once more time, is what we're seeing is the current in-house foster carers, regardless if they live inside Thurrock or they live outside the boundary, will qualify. But when we're doing the recruitment drive going forward from April of next year, if approved, that people living outside the borough will not qualify for the allowance. So it's the people that are currently providing the support will, but the new people coming afterwards will not. So hopefully that clarifies that.
Councillor Akinade.
Yes, it's clarified now. So coming from April, then that's when, it's clearer now. Thank you. Yeah.
Any further questions? No. Councillor Horden.
Yeah, just to help you, Councillor Akinade, it says on page 131 that the example that you just gave, if someone is caring for a complex child and they physically need to be away from the borough of Thurrock, it's quite clear on page 131 that in exceptional circumstances a payment could be made outside the circumstances described. That's an override band that we have in most forms of care that the director and the assistant director will have. So if we have that circumstance that you've described, a child has to be cared for outside the borough, but we want to provide that additional support. That's an exceptional circumstance where officers could use their own discretion. So the policy is not built so rigidly that officers couldn't do that if they felt it was necessary.
Councillor Akinbowen.
I just want a quick clarification on this. If someone is on benefit, let's say stay-at-home mom, who is on council tax exemption already, how is that going to influence that person? How is it going to be a sellout, a selling point for that person to be a foster carer?
In essence, I think it's if somebody had 100% benefit, then it isn't going to benefit them, is the gist of it, because some people have a 50% benefit, some people will pay all of their council tax, so it will be based on that case-by-case personal situation that is there. So in that example, that's somebody that wouldn't benefit from this additional support, but if it's somebody that had 50% or they were paying 100% of their council tax, it would benefit them.
Is there any other selling point that we can introduce apart from just council tax?
All I would say is that our pay rates at this moment in time are very competitive, and there's been a recent increase which puts us in line with the other local authorities. So I think that is where we are competitive, and I think if we get the approval today for the council tax exemption, that puts us ahead of everybody else, and that gives us a very unique selling point, and that's what we're looking for, to try and bring them local foster carers in and actually trying to improve the financial position, because obviously if we can do this, there will be a level of cost avoidance and eventually saving, which I think is what, in the current climate, what we desperately need. So that's why we're trying to be creative in this approach.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions in the chamber or on Teams? No. Okay, well, we can move to the recommendation then. Again, it's just the one for members to recommend that the introduction of a council tax exemption scheme starting in April 2021, 21-22 financial year, as outlined in section 3 in this report, is considered by Cabinet. Is that agreed? Agreed? Yeah. Yeah, that one's agreed. So that leaves us to the final agenda item, the work plan. Are there any comments, questions from anyone regarding the work programme going forward? No. No. Officers, are there any comments on your part? No. No. Okay. Well, with that then, I'm happy to close this meeting this evening.